Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 9th of March, comes to you from London, and it's all eyes on the Middle East at the moment. We're seeing crude oil jumping above $100 on Brent crude, up some 15%, and really that's just a huge spike in the oil price, and that's just affecting the whole energy mix, which we analyze for our clients every morning in energy, and we're seeing here this is quite an interesting chart. This is European gas TTF for the Dutch gas front month contract. How the Russia-Ukraine war had a big effect in that spike. So we're nothing like that at the moment, but we are seeing price levels the highest for 2-3 years now. And what's interesting is if this is a long protracted war, then that's what we have to worry about, is how long this lasts. Apart from the human cost, the financial cost will be just very dependent on how quickly the situation is resolved and the Straits of Hormuz are open, and we can see energy prices coming down. Now, this is having a huge impact on bond markets globally, and we're seeing here the Japanese bond market starting to move again. This is really the most indebted country in the world, and one we have to worry about. We're seeing US bond yields also rising higher, so that's really quite key. And the German bond yield this morning did at one point, this is UK bond yields, some 50 basis points rise here, 0.5% rise. That's a massive impact for government borrowing, and that's something that we're going to see. Now, the German market did activate this upside target this morning, so if you're a true point and figure follower, then that has actually been activated, but we need to close above that level to activate it. But the targets are there, and if we look at the long-term chart, you can see move, consolidation, move, and if we look at a longer term chart of bonds, if we go to a monthly chart, you can see that trend in bond yields, which I've talked about before now. That trend, we can just put a least squared regression trend on there, that downtrend over 40 years where we saw the death of inflation, that really has changed. So we just can't ignore that. It's there. Of course, you can watch these targets on your Bloomberg. There's crude oil. You can watch German bond yields. Of course, Bloomberg, fantastic for watching bond markets. And you can feed those prices into your updater system as well. I'm running here on LSEG. Updater runs on dozens of different data services. The choice is yours. And taking a look at stocks. Well, first of all, just quickly look at the dollar. That's seeing a resurgence as a sort of safe haven, holding its gains. So even though the long-term trend has been one that's bearish, the key thing will be, can the dollar break out of this trend and reverse it? Now, futures, we're seeing the S&P future down 1.4%. That's been really significant, that we are starting to see a move through the cloud. These markets really have struggled to make new highs. If we look at the NASDAQ, we have, really October was the high. We are likely to finally activate this downside target today. It's already activated on the NASDAQ future. So it really does, and US stocks, of course, will be very determining in terms of what happens to global stock markets. We're seeing the FTSE down 1.7%, the DAX in Germany down 2.5%. So we're really seeing some big moves here. The 60-minute charts showing those moves up. So that's where you do see the targets, and that's, you can't ignore the targets when you see that. And the same with the UK market. We're seeing here the targets are given. So it's a question of, if your time horizon is very long term, you'll ride this out. But shorter term, then that's a key factor. And we saw Asian markets down quite strongly. Japan was down 3.8%. Upside targets were met, then a new downside target kicking in on that's the 60-minute. We've activated a downside target on the daily. So again, that's quite key that we've done that. We're still above the cloud, but the reality is we've got a downside target. don't forget, downside targets are less likely to meet in uptrends, so it just means we may not get all the way to the target. The Aussie market was down 2.8%, so that's showing here that we're just now starting to come back below the cloud, looking more resilient than most, but still a factor, and the downside target was given there as well. So that's the key, because you want to be checking your stocks. Now, looking at some of the other things, we are seeing some products recovering. We're seeing sugar bouncing off the bottom there, but 14 is a critical level. Gold has been weaker, just struggling to make a new high there. Even though we've got an upside target, we need to move to a new high to activate that. When we look at the 60-minute chart, you can see we've got a potential downside target, and we are below the cloud, so you do need to keep an eye on that. Now, looking at stocks, starting with the Dow on Friday, and we didn't have many stocks up. Most stocks were down, and that looks set to continue today. We had stocks like Nvidia. They were the second worst performer in the Dow Jones Index. We talked about Nvidia a lot, but it really does look like they're going to activate this downside target, which is a second downside target. So we've got an upside and a downside, but we're moving below the cloud, so you would resolve that. And of course, you can go to the shorter term chart. You can see which targets came in most recently, and that's again quite key that we're seeing that. That we are seeing that push to the downside. So that's quite key. A lot of stocks coming off. Some stocks not so bad. We're seeing Boeing having a bit of a bounce there, but the longer term situation is quite key. Now, you can always follow your own stocks with TradingView with the target. So you can go on TradingView, we can look at Brent crude, we can look at Nvidia, that's a 5-minute chart. You can gold, again, that's an hourly chart. You can actually go through your stocks and just literally have your own list. And so do watch the targets. It's going to be absolutely critical seeing those targets and what the targets are on your stock. So keep an eye on those. I do recommend it's a time to be vigilant. Some stocks will have bigger downside targets than others, and that's what we need to be able to assess. Now, looking at the NASDAQ, look, I just ranked the list by the worst performers. Interestingly, you've got Micron. That's been a real star performer and had big high hopes. Didn't quite get to the target, which is bearish in itself. Lower high, lower low potentially. If you've done my training, you'll know the importance of that on my 12-hour training course. But the key thing is, how much do you want to live with these downside targets? And of course, the shorter term will show you those targets first, so you can see whether that's something you want to live with, and that's the real key here. So last of all, we'll look at the UK market, and first of all, we look at the leaders. We've only got 6 stocks up today, 7 stocks, 2, 4, 6 stocks up. So that just tells you, and of course the star performers are Shell, upside targets met, BP, again, an upside target given in January, that's been met. So it's interesting that those targets were there, beforehand. So you're really quite key that we're seeing that. And if we look at the other end of the spectrum, we've got some quite key performers here. So we're seeing there on Anglos, they're starting to fall away. Really interesting just looking at the stocks, and you can go through these. And for example, EasyJet down 3.7%, airlines being badly hit. That's on the daily chart, and we can just keep going. So it's really quite key just to go through the stocks and see. If I just pick any stock at random. So this is a really interesting one. This is Kingfisher, and we can see here we've got upside targets, but we're falling away. That would be showing up on the 60-minute chart, downside targets that are showing up on the 60-minute, the importance of changing the time horizon. You can see here we're hitting resistance. We do say on the lessons, if you've got resistance levels and targets, the resistance levels are vital. So do keep an eye on your price targets. An absolutely important time to be vigilant. That's it for today. Hang in there. Until tomorrow, happy charting. Bye for now.